Hey, this is Joe Gilder from Home Studio Corner. Today we're going to answer the question, what's the difference between mono and stereo? If you know the answer, you can move on. But a lot of folks get into audio, get into recording, get some software, get a microphone, get some virtual instruments and a keyboard. And there's all this terminology in our world that unless you know what it is, there's no real reason for you to intuitively know what mono means, what stereo means. We have some understanding of stereo because we have a car stereo, we have a home theater stereo, but what is the difference and when do you use one over the other? So real quick history lesson, long time ago, when people were making records, they were being played on, the big record player in the living room, and it had a single speaker. And that was the way people listened. So a single speaker would be a mono listening environment. And since everyone was listening on a single speaker, there was no stereo, wasn't even a thought. That was just how people listened. So music for a long time was just recorded in mono, meaning everything was right up the middle. There wasn't a left channel and a right channel, which is what stereo is. It was all up the middle. So we were all sitting around a single speaker listening to our music. Well, eventually, because we like, human nature being what it is, we thought, what if we did more? So then we brought in a second speaker, okay? Now we can sit between two speakers and we can send some signals to the left speaker, some signals to the right speaker, and send some to both evenly. And that's how we get a stereo mix, stereo meaning two, where we have some things on the left, some things on the right, some things up the middle. I think originally it was used for like radio programs once they got to broadcasting in stereo, where someone would walk across the stage from the left to the right. And being in stereo, you could record that with two microphones and it would sound as if the person was walking left to right. You'd send one microphone to this speaker, one microphone to this one, and you would get that stereo image, which if you've never experienced before, or ever noticed or ever listened to like those kind of binaural recordings that are meant to put you in the space, it's really cool and kind of freaky sometimes. So once stereo began to be the norm, now we have the options for recording things in mono and in stereo. So it originally was just about playback, like what are we playing back, one channel or two? Is it just one channel through one speaker, or is it two channels through two speakers, which will give us the ability to vary what's happening in one over the other, which gives us that sense of left and right and middle that we have when we listen to things on, say, our earbuds or on two sets of speakers or even in our car stereo. So that part isn't all that confusing. People tend to get that. Where people get confused, and understandably so, is when it comes to recording. So I want to create a guitar track. And I go into my system and I go to create a track and it gives me the option mono or stereo. Well, a lot of people think, well, it should be stereo because stereo is better, right? Not so fast, Turbo. Let's talk about that for a second. So within the recording software, something like Studio One or whatever you're using, any system will support this. You have the option to have a stereo track or a mono track. What does that mean in terms of recording? Here's a simple rule. This applies to the stereo speakers as well as to recording. Mono means one, stereo means two. So if I have a microphone set up, let's say this coffee cup is a microphone, and I'm recording a vocal, okay? It's me, it's the microphone plugged into the system. How many sources do I have? One. I have one microphone. Ergo, that needs to be a mono track. Let's say I'm recording acoustic guitar, hold on, and I'm using two pencil condenser microphones, okay? Now I have two separate microphones, two separate cables plugged into two separate channels on my audio interface. Now I would record to a stereo channel. 1, 2. Stereo means two. So on a stereo track, this one would get recorded to the left side of that track, this would get recorded to the right, we would hear those back. And so we can set these mics up in a nice XY pattern or something on our acoustic guitar, and we get a nice stereo recording. Couple of common things that people get confused about. Let's say you are recording that vocal with a single microphone, and you record it in. Some people think, okay, I'm going to duplicate that vocal and pan one left and one right, and now I've got stereo. That's not how it works. Remember, when we have two sets of speakers and I send a vocal through it, if I send an equal amount to the one on the left and the one on the right, I'm essentially hearing it in mono. It's going to be right up the middle. All you're doing by duplicating the track and panning it left and right is adding volume. You're not doing anything to create any sort of stereo balance. Same with guitars. You may have heard people say, double your guitar part. Play one guitar part and then double it. What people get confused is they think, oh, I can just copy and paste that guitar track to a second track, pan one left, pan one right, and I've got this nice doubled track. No, that's not how it works. When we talk about doubling and stereo in terms of doubling, we're actually talking about playing that guitar part 2 separate times, recording it on one mono track, recording it on another mono track, then panning them left and right. The differences between those tracks are what allow us to hear something in stereo, where it sounds like there's something coming out of this speaker, something coming out of this speaker. Now, some people will say, just take a single guitar track, duplicate it, and then delay this one a little bit so it's not happening at exactly the same time. That will give you a sense of a stereo image, but you'll have all kinds of phase problems. You'll notice that while it does sound wide, it also sounds like it's twisted, like you want to turn your head a little bit when you listen to it. That is not the right way to get a stereo sound out of guitars. It's not. There's 2 ways, 2 kind of what I would say proper ways to get a stereo sound out of something like a guitar. The first is to use 2 microphones. I put 2 microphones on the acoustic guitar. Now I'm getting a stereo image. If I space the microphones out, I'll get a little bit wider stereo image. It's not going to be super duper wide like the doubles will, but it will be wider than a single microphone, which may be appropriate for a certain circumstance. The second way to get a stereo sounding guitar is to record the guitar part 2 separate times, pan one left and pan one right. Those are the only 2 ways. Now, there are plugins that kind of will give you a little bit of stereo width. You can mess with stereo delays and things like that. But as far as proper recording, getting mono and stereo, I want to make this super clear. If you want it stereo, there has to be 2 of something. If you take a guitar track and you duplicate it into a second track, that's not technically 2 of something. It's the same part twice. That's different than having 2 separate things. Remember how I said mono is 1, stereo is 2. If I have a single microphone, it doesn't do me any good to record that to a stereo track. It's a single microphone. It is a mono signal by definition. So recording it to a stereo track doesn't give me anything. If I record 2 microphones, now we're talking. Do I ever stereo mic a vocal? No. It's not wrong, I just don't see any point. But acoustic guitars, sure. Or maybe I'll put 2 microphones on a guitar amp sometimes and then have both, maybe on separate tracks so I can mess with the panning or just leave them up the middle to have a combination of tones. Common places in recording scenarios where you'll see stereo. Acoustic instruments, a lot of times that XY thing on a cello or a guitar can be really great. Overheads for drums. A lot of times you'll have a XY or a spaced pair for overheads. Percussion. Sometimes you'll have 2 mics set up so you have a little bit of width to the percussion that you're recording. Big instruments like piano, you might have 2 instruments on there. Anytime you plug in a keyboard that has 2 outputs, left and right, that would be stereo. If you have something like a Wurlitzer, which has just a single output, that's a mono instrument. You'll plug it into 1 track, you won't get any stereo-ness out of that. Now, Wurlitzer samples inside of software, those tend to be stereo. Okay, last thing. Every recording system has a different way of showing whether a track is mono or stereo. Sometimes you can tell by looking at the meters. If there's just one meter going up and down, that's typically mono. If you see 2 little meters side by side and they're slightly different, that's usually stereo. Another way to tell is usually somewhere on the track there'll be a section with a circle or 2 circles. So if you have it with just one, if you see that section has just 1 circle, that typically means it is a mono track. If you see it with 2 kind of interlocking circles, almost like links of a chain, that's usually the symbol for stereo. In Studio One, for example, on a track, I can click this and it'll turn into this. So I can transform it from a mono channel to a stereo channel. Now remember, if I already recorded a mono signal on the track, that's not really going to do anything. But there are instances where maybe I have a mono signal, but then I want a stereo delay, where the vocal is mono, but then the delay is stereo. Things like that, that's where I might want to transform between the 2. Thanks for watching all the way to the end of this video. I've been running Home Studio Corner for over a decade, and it's really easy for me to just want to get into whatever's new and exciting that I'm working on, a new EQ trick, a new way of routing things in a mix, mid-side processing or something like that. But it's important that we always circle back to the basics, things like this. What is mono? What is stereo? If you have other basic things you have questions about, first of all, there's no shame in that. We all start from zero, knowing nothing about this, and then we develop skill over time. We develop knowledge. We learn new things. We apply that. We get better. So if you have questions about basic things you'd like to know about, please leave a comment below. I will collect those ideas and work those into my schedule for future videos because I want this to be the single best resource for you as you're making your music. I want you to watch a video or two of me and get so excited to go back in the studio and make music. That's the goal. Ultimately, the goal is for you not to watch me and just go make music, but you can keep watching for now. All right, that's it for me. Thanks for watching. By the way, if you haven't seen my recording cheat sheet, it's really cool. It talks about a lot of different habits and tricks that I've developed over the years for my recording game to make my productions a lot better. You can get that for free at recordingcheatsheet.com. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.